think at the heart of it is sensationalism. We want people to tune in. We want people to watch. How do we do that? We will use graphic, images. We will frame it in a very emotionally charging way because that will keep people watching. That's being exacerbated by social media, constantly being exposed to a lot of negativity. If you already have some fears about the world and what's happening, then you're going to seek out things to confirm that negativity. Be realistic about what's happening in the media news, but I also try to always encourage people to find people who are counteracting a lot of the negativity that you see.
Welcome to Just Healing, where we rediscover humanity in our conversations around trauma and celebrate all the unique ways we love and heal. Hey everybody, welcome to this next episode of Just Healing, and we have an amazing guest. Oh my gosh, I heard him speak at Script, and he taught me so much about media and psychology, and let's just bring him on, and I want to introduce you to Dr. Corey. Tell everybody what you do.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Deborah. So I, as Dr. Deborah shared, am a media psychologist. That's just a fancy way of saying that I look at, examine, assess how television, film, AI, technology, you name it, influences human behavior. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that in this conversation today.
Yes, I want to know how you got into all that, because I was just riveted when you told me. I'm like, what?
Yeah, so that journey actually started 15 years ago, serendipitously, actually. So I was studying at Columbia University in New York at the time, earning my master's in communication. And you have to take so many sort of, extra courses that you're interested in, but it's not necessarily directly aligned to your degree, so to speak. And media psycho or the psychology of media was one of those courses. And I saw the title and I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And I think within the first couple of classes, I was sold. I was like, oh, this is where the future's headed. We need experts in the seat to sort of help us sense of how technology and the internet and entertainment, all of that is going to continue to evolve in this digital age. And so the rest is really history. From there, I started looking at, okay, who offers a doctoral degree in this field? Because I knew that having a PhD would carry weight amongst these topics and the research that would be involved in discussing these topics. And so at the time, I think Fielding Graduate University out in Santa Barbara was one of the only schools in the country that offered it. I think since then, several other schools offer it now. But I applied, I got in 2020, right as the pandemic was really starting to unfold. I was wrapping up my dissertation.
Yeah. And I met you like right after when you
Right
started
after
doing
that.
stuff. Yeah. And it's so funny you talk about Columbia. That's how I got into forensics. I was at Columbia doing my master's. And I'm
Yep.
like, I worked with a certain population because they send you on those practicums. I said, what is that? I want to do that. And I went to one of the only programs in forensic psychology at Columbia, like opened my mind.
Absolutely.
It was so amazing. It's so funny that we came to what we do the same way through Columbia, you know? Yeah. So looking at the world, because the world is quite interesting. That's how I'll say it right now. How do you think the media is handling all of this?
I think that every day is just this sort of free for all, right? I think at the heart of it is sensationalism. That's the same story it's been for decades, right? We want people to tune in, we want people to watch. How do we do that?
Uh-huh.
We will use graphic, images. We will frame it in a very emotionally charging way because that will keep people watching and coming back time and time again. And so I think that's being exacerbated by social media, because we take that clip from the news, then we post it on social media, we post it on YouTube, and then it goes viral. And so we are constantly being exposed to a lot of negativity, bias comes into play. If you already have some fears about the world and what's happening, then you're going to seek out things to confirm that negativity. So I don't think that the media in general is handling it the best way. But where I find hope is in some of the independent journalists, folks like you, the work that you're doing with podcasts, but then you have to do the work of finding that content. And so, when I come across something like this, that I'm like, oh, this is sort of cutting through the noise and giving people a toolkit to use. I'm sharing it. I'm posting it. I'm texting it to the other people. So I try to be realistic about what's happening in the media news, but I also try to always encourage people to find people who are counteracting a
Yeah.
lot of the negativity
Just
that you see.
going against it. Now you dropped a term right now. Now we gotta explore that. Say it again. Negative what?
Negativity bias.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So you wanna take it, or you want me to take it?
No, I want you to break that down because people are going, what, what? So you
Yeah.
tell me.
So when we think about negativity bias, we think about, what negative things might be coming up for us, or what negative things might already exist.
Hmm.
And then we continue to seek out, it might be news, it might be articles. We seek out things that will just further solidify that negativity. And so then we find ourselves living in this constant state of negativity, right? And so the only way really to disrupt that is through forming good habits. And so I talk about that a lot in terms of just the discipline that it takes. Doom scrolling is very prominent, right? It's so easy to get sucked into that. We look at what's happening in politics, we look at
Hmm.
what's happening in Gaza, and it's important to be informed about these things. I never want to discourage people about staying informed and being aware,
Hmm.
but we also have to tap into our nervous system and
Yes.
stop and pause and say, well, okay, wait a minute, how is this making me feel? What am I projecting onto my family members, my colleagues, people that random people that I'm meeting? I carry that energy with me when all I'm consuming is negativity.
Right. And people want to confirm their thought process. And I was telling my kids that the other day because they're looking like, oh my God, all these people like it. Okay, but who's doing that? What are they looking at? And they keep posting the same stuff. They want that confirmation, right? With their bias. And it's human nature, but because you don't, everybody, no one wants to be alone, right? So you keep confirming. And that's where you find a different support system to change that because groupthink happens, right?
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
hitting all the key words. And
Yeah.
so I think that, having this conversation and just introducing people to some of the terms, and
Yeah.
this is a part of media literacy. It's a work that we maybe thought at the beginning of the advent of social media, it would just be fun and entertainment all the time. But no, there's some work involved in being able to navigate this thing with some sense of agency.
Right. Right. Because people want to think alike, but if you have too much groupthink, thinking that everything is the same, you need some variables that are negative in there that goes against what you're thinking. So it's not just that you're seeking it out, is that you need what is it, someone to play devil's advocate with you so that your thought process opens it up more wide, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you heard of positive television?
Have heard of positive television. And when you mention it, the first thought that came to mind is, gosh, I guess it's been 10 plus years now, but the Oprah Winfrey Network. I remember her starting out, and that was her vision, her goal. She felt like what she had done in the talk show space, right, which was unlike what other talk show hosts were doing that were popular. She felt like I can build a whole network and people will come and want to consume this type of entertainment, infotainment, edutainment. There's all of these
Hmm.
different terms. And she quickly found that that wasn't the case. And the network as a whole started to suffer. And so for me, I think that there's a certain way to do positive entertainment and edutainment. I think what we're doing is a
Mhm.
great example of it. Podcasts, a lot of the YouTube series I'm seeing right now, there's an audience for it. But I think when we think more mainstream network television, we tend, going back to your original question that started this conversation, we tend to go back to sensationalism. We want to oftentimes escape into things that are sometimes nostalgic, but also can be a little traumatic. And I think there's a lot of psychology into why we would cling to that type of entertainment
Yeah.
over, say, more positive
Right.
information.
Right. And I was talking with someone from ABC News and they were asking me a similar question and they were talking about positive TV. And I said, and what happened? And they're like, it didn't work. Like, there's people who watch it, but it's very few. I said, you want to know why? I said, because the Americans are voyeurs. They run to tell the tantalizing story. They run to the gossip, which it's not healthy to stay in that toxic environment, right? But we love toxicity. So how do we get out of that? Because we work with trauma survivors, people have stuff, how do we change that script, to get people to maybe lean in a different direction? Because it's really hard.
Right. Well, I think, we take the very title of this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Just healing.
Yeah.
I often invite people to, so for example, a question I get asked often as a media psychologist is social media making me depressed? And I invite people to pause there and I say, all right, we could say that, but that's easy. That's easy cognitive load, right? To just take that narrative and run with it. But ask yourself, how am I feeling before I go to social media? Right? Sometimes that might mean going through your own story of childhood trauma, sexual abuse. We can go down the list because you may be coming to social media through that lens of that unhealed wound, that unhealed hurt, right? So again, full circle moments happening. You're then looking for, okay, relatability. Where are stories of people who have gone through what I've gone through, or who are experiencing what I'm going through. True crime is a great example of this, right? I've experienced firsthand an aunt who was murdered, right? And so I found myself at times, because we never got resolution from her murder, really. And I have found myself watching stories just to try to make sense of what
Right.
happened to my aunt, and I think that's what happens. I don't always think that it's people just necessarily wanting to stay in the negativity and the trauma, but there is this sense making of the world that often happens through negative television and negative entertainment. So there's some work happening, but you still need the right guidance for how to process what's coming up for you, even in viewing and consuming these things.
Right. And it's like taking your, like you said with your aunt, and learning that you're trying to answer questions, right? And I find a lot of people when they talk to me and they're saying, "Oh, I watched this or I did this." They're trying to answer a question, right? And we all do that. But it's like, how are you answering the question, right? And what I always tell my kids, what site is that? Is it a credible site? Or are you looking at somebody's YouTube video who doesn't even know what they're talking about? Now, sometimes TikTok or them, they do good ones where people actually know their stuff. But sometimes if someone's just, and it's like you got to stop the scroll, because when you stop on it, that's when you get, what is it called, an algorithm? They start showing you the same thing, right? I didn't know about algorithms till you told me that. Remember, I was like, they do that? Like,
It's feeding you, like, it's literally for you, as they brand it,
yeah,
right? Whatever you're liking, whatever you're getting your little dopamine kick from, they're gonna continue to feed you that because they
right,
wanna keep you on the app. Their
right,
goal is to keep you on the app, and so you're absolutely right in that.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so how do you, like, you want your, like, algorithm to basically be more positive, you should have to stop on positive things, right?
You need to be liking positive things, sharing positive things, commenting on positive things, saving things. Yeah,
Commenting as well.
commenting as well, right? It's this thing of social media is a daily, I hate to call it work, but it's a choice. It's a habit you have to build, because otherwise you will feel like you're losing control, like you're losing
Mhm,
that agency of what you're seeing if you
mhm.
don't start participating actively in what you're seeing and consuming.
That
Yeah,
makes sense because I know I sometimes just don't say nothing. Like I just, post and go on. But I've noticed when I actually say something or I actually like something, it's more tailored and I don't get weird because
absolutely.
because they don't know what to give me, so they're just giving me everything, you
Absolutely.
know?
I've seen it. I've seen, prior to becoming a media psychologist, I use social media really for just entertainment. So a lot of what was coming up in my algorithm, it might have been music, dancing, comedy, and all of that's great because it creates balance and
Mhm,
moderation. But I'm like, you know what? I need my daily boost of, positive self-esteem. I'm looking for mental
mhm.
health guidance. If I want to see that, I've got to participate in the engagement of that kind of content. And so my algorithm, I have a beautiful algorithm now, but I had to carefully curate it to be that it just doesn't happen because you think, oh, I want to see more positivity.
Yeah, it doesn't. And, we have people who are traumatized. And is there something to compound trauma that could be happening when they're scrolling and like they had someone die or they're seeing, right? Because they'll put anything out there. Do you think that's psychologically affecting them in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of unconsciousness that happens in this space, right? I don't necessarily know if people are kind of going out with this vendetta
Hmm.
of, "Oh, this happened to me and now I want to keep everybody in fear." That's just sort of a byproduct of it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 And, because you can have one trauma and then it leads to another trauma and it leads to another trauma. And then you don't even know what you're really reacting to. You just have all of these compound things. And then it goes into you pass that on to generations and you have generations of fear, right? And
Absolutely.
that's a lot of what's going on in our
Uh,
world right now. Generations of
I
fear.
think it's what's happening too because of it is it's leading to empathy fatigue. It's leading to compassion collapse.
Yeah.
Right, all of these things are happening, and so a theme I'm seeing on social media a lot, and that I'm writing around right now is we're in an empathy crisis.
Hmm.
Where we're seeing things and we're not moved.
Hmm.
We're not moved to whether it's protests, whether it's write your legislators, whether it's, literally take the app off your phone
Yeah.
because of how it's impacting you, right? And again, I think the main thing we just keep speaking to in this conversation is how this is going to require some active participation on your
Yeah.
part,
Right.
and sometimes active participation is literally like checking in with yourself to be like, I'm seeing all this stuff and I'm not really feeling much, but I know I should. Like what I'm seeing should be motivating me, impacting me, moving me for change. I'm not. I'm just sort of sitting in it. That's one of the first signs that it's time to take a pause or maybe a step back.
That's good to know, because sometimes you just need your joy and you need your joy in everything you're doing. And if it's not giving you joy, then why are you doing it? Like someone yesterday, just yesterday, said to me like, well, I see you and we don't engage that much. I said, well, I've reached out to you. It's kind of like social media. And if you're not engaging with me, maybe I'm not giving you joy. And I want you to have joy when you're in your life. Right. And so it's the same thing. And they're like, oh, I get it now. You want to bring joy. So bring joy, like, right, in your space of social media. And it's very hard for a lot of people, because of
Yeah,
all the things we've talked about today.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you suggest you said engaging, scrolling, all that stuff, but in this world, like how can we just make a positive choice to move forward and make sure that we are not being taken in by all of this?
Absolutely. I think, the first thing I encourage a lot of people to do is when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do shouldn't be to reach for your phone. Like it's one thing to look at it, to turn the alarm off, right? Or
Hmm.
just to see what time it is, maybe see if your mom, sibling, somebody has reached out, in that kind of sense. Those things are normal. that's fine. But immediately going to news outlets, immediately going to social media apps before you've really centered yourself, I think really sets a lot of people up for what could be a really an awry day, right? So I
Mm,
say whatever your practice needs to be. For me, is stretching. It might be lighting your Palo Santo. It might be journaling. It might be going for that walk. You need to really start your day centered. I think there's an over reliance on going to social media for comfort or
mhm.
going to your phone, to distract yourself from really doing what you need to do for you to start the day. So that's always sort of my baseline. Have some sort of practice that gets you centered before the day. Then I encourage people turn off notifications for any of those news apps or those social media apps, right? And I know the argument a lot of times is, why I use social media for my business. Okay. Well, just like with an email, or just like when somebody would call your office or something, they have to wait a little bit before
Yeah,
they get a response.
yeah,
So this sense of urgency, that because somebody DM'd me or reached out to me, via social media or text, that I've got to immediately respond. Take that pressure off yourself. That's not necessary, right? Give yourself, or let people know, it might be 24, 48 hours before I respond, but I'll respond, right? So setting some protocols, putting some practices into place can help with that. I think, Dr. Deborah, most people, as I've said a couple of times now in this conversation, probably don't want to do the work,
mm,
meaning that you might need to take a week off of social media,
mhm,
like literally do a detox. I
mhm,
promise you, social media isn't going anywhere.
mhm.
You're going to
It's
deal with
not,
a little bit of you're going to deal with a little bit of FOMO. I get it. That's normal. But you've got to build good habits around your social media use, because if you don't, it's going to overwhelm you. It's going to lead to sadness in
yeah,
many cases, as you're comparing your life to other people's highlights of their
yeah,
life. If you don't
that
really
aren't
get
real.
behind the scenes, it's this domino effect. And so I want people to really, if they don't take anything away from this conversation, just realize that you've got to show up for yourself as it relates to social media in a way that you probably haven't been.
Yeah, and how do you think we can unify in that? Because people see it, like you said, and they say, "Oh, girls doing this." Oh, dude, that stuff's not real. You don't even realize that that is staged. So how are we going to unify so that we get rid of some of this?
Yeah, I mean, well, you said it. We've been having this conversation about it not being real for some years now. So there's this sense of, like, you got to believe what people are telling you at this
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
right? These things, they're producing their highest quality of their life for you to
right,
see.
right,
It's I tell people a lot of times, like, our social media pages and profiles are like our own television network at this point. We're sitting here now with ring lights and microphones to give the best of us when we
right,
share it out to the world.
right.
So there's some good practices to that, but also people are using it in a lot of times to, be misleading, or not. I should Better word is maybe not be forthcoming, about what's really going on in our lives. And so, just having some sense of consciousness around this is really happening. And I think the other piece of it is, now that you know that it's not real, stop comparing yourself. That social comparison
Right.
piece is really affecting so many of us in our mental health, because that imposter syndrome comes in. We start feeling like, well, things aren't happening fast enough for
Mhm.
me. I'm such a huge proponent of divine timing. Thinking about social media, and what I've seen today that speaks to this conversation is Jamal Roberts, who just won American Idol. I came across a video where they were sharing that, he had been on another reality TV show, Sunday's Best, and lost twice, but he just won American Idol, right? So you could very well be someone comparing yourself to Jamal Roberts' journey, or even Jamal was comparing himself to other people's journey at some point, right? But divine timing, whatever is for you, I just believe it's for you. So just having this awareness that you're not behind,
Mhm.
that what happens for somebody else, That's what's supposed to happen for them, and what's supposed to happen for you will happen for you.
Right. It just wasn't meant for you. And I
Yeah.
and I always say that that's their blessing. That's their blessing because your blessing's coming if you just wait, right? And it's very hard because we're in this world that does that. And I think that's one of the barriers that people why people can't move on, right? They just can't realize that they have their own path. And we don't preach about that, right?
Yeah.
Enough.
And like we were saying a moment ago too, like checking in with yourself before you go to social media. There may be some self esteem, some insecurities that you already have that were really derived out of childhood, rejection, the social hierarchy that we go through as adolescents. And you still are hanging on to some of those narratives about who you were and what your experience was in that time. And so now you're bringing that in your adult life to social media, and so, of course, you're going to be affected when you see, oh, they got that job. I've always wanted to do that thing that they're doing, and you're not doing it. Of course, that's going to activate some negative emotions in you. So, again, I don't never want to negate what's really happening for people on an emotional level, but I also want you to be cognizant of where did this start and
Uh-huh.
how can I maybe disrupt that narrative that I'm now carrying into social media and projecting onto other people.
Because that's how you heal, right? That's how you move forward. Is you have to have the awareness. You got to get centered, right? That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, for
What an
sure.
amazing discussion. So we are almost done, believe it or not. That went fast, didn't it? So why don't you tell me how you want to, what do you want to leave us with?
The empathy fatigue piece, I even saw your eyes kind of get
Yeah.
bright. We talked about that. And I want to invite folks to pause before you comment, pause before you speculate. There's just everything that we're seeing, whether it's watching television news or what we're coming across on our social media feeds right now. I believe is inviting us to pause. This is a moment of reflection. There are going to be times where you're moved to action, and that's great. But I don't want you to be emotionally immobilized
Hmm.
by the doom scrolling. So just pause, moderation, have a what I call a social media diet where you're not eating everything that's served up to you on a
Yeah.
daily basis, but you're picking and choosing and hopefully carefully curating what you're seeing. I promise it makes such a huge difference. These are everything I share with people. I want you to know I'm doing in my daily practice. This isn't somebody preaching at you. I'm doing this work alongside you, and I'm sharing with you what seems to be working for me and a lot of other people.
Yeah. And I've seen your social media just blow up because you're practicing and you actually are doing it. And I was like, wow, that's just like so impressive, you know? Well, Dr. Corey, how do people get in touch with you?
You can find me across all social media channels, Corey Emanuel, Dr. Corey Emanuel. Either one will find you or find your way to me. I have a TEDx that I did last year here in LA that you can find on YouTube, where I talk a lot about the things that we've discussed here today, like confirmation bias and empathy, for example. So, yeah, anywhere across social media. And then, of course, you can always visit me at my website, CoreyEmanuel.com.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Just Healing.